Welcome to part 3 of our Cyber Finance GRC series. And if you have been waiting, then for sure, we also look forward to having these conversations every Wednesday when we can actually come together as a community to build our skill set together in terms of being able to share our experiences, our wisdom, our knowledge of cybersecurity in every way that we can. And that's also one of the reasons why we have these conversations. And if you have missed parts 1 and 2 of this series, then you can access those recordings on the CyberJA YouTube channel. And in our second episode, we covered a number of um, topics or elements as it relates to cybersecurity financing, which I will definitely look at in a few seconds. Just for those who might be joining for the first time, at least you would have an idea as to some of the things that we have covered so far. So, guys, as usual, feel free to ask questions, make comments. We're always open to whatever suggestions that we can use to make this a better experience for not just you, but also ourselves as we seek to build ourselves collectively as cybersecurity professionals. Um, so for today's episode, then Colin will be covering a number of Nelson. That's Colin Nelson. Colin, welcome. Thanks for joining as usual, my friend.
Thank you so much for having me, Richie. Thank you so much. It's a great opportunity to be here. It's always looking forward to it.
Yeah, sure, definitely.
Right.
But before we actually get right into the details of the objectives that we have for this Cyber Finance GRC Series Part 3, we both came across an article published by the World Economic Forum, which highlights the growth rate of cybercrime in terms of cost and also the costliest types of cybercrime. So, Colin will definitely be sharing those findings with us, so at least we have an idea as to the direction in which this session will be going for the rest of the time that we'll be here. I mean, interacting with you. So, Colin, would you like to get into the details of those findings for us as we proceed?
Okay, thank you so much, Richie. It's a very good one that we decided to talk about this today. I mean, for the past couple of weeks, we've been trying to emphasize the need as cybersecurity professionals to understand how to communicate, cybersecurity situations in financial terms, which that was like the main idea that pioneered this particular series. And it's very important that this is actually coming at this time where we have constantly tried to interpret why we need to focus on how to interpret cybersecurity issues in financial terms. So a very important thing is that we look at the prediction of how cybersecurity situations are expected to skyrocket in the next couple of years. So it's being predicted right now that in the space of let's even say by next year 2024 that we're expected to have about 14.57% increase in cybercrime. So what it means is that these hackers, these guys trying to gain access to your sensitive data, are constantly evolving over time. So what it means that you as a cybersecurity professional has to constantly be on your toes to ensure that you provide every form of mitigations that you can provide within your organization to reduce the possible cyber attacks to the barest minimum. Now, imagine where this number was at 2018. It was about 0.86 at 2018. And within 2018 to 2023, we've seen about maybe now we're on 11.50%. That's a great increment. And this is a constant growth that would, I mean, to be very honest with you, I would say that the growth would be on an incremental level. It's never going to drop. So the best thing to do is to find a way to also evolve by learning some of this concept that we're trying to help you understand. Because the goal is that if you are able to understand what we've been teaching you so far, you are able to build scenarios, able to build measurable instances and present to your management to say, there's this prediction that cybercrime would skyrocket in this period of time. And we know with the data that we have that these are the possible issues that we are going to face in our organization. If we're able to implement this tools, leveraging on this knowledge that we have, we will be able to protect ourselves so that we wouldn't fall among this percentage of people that would, face possible cyber attacks in the future. So that would be that on the expected growth in cybercrime. And also just to draw your attention a bit to a very important thing is to see what are the possible types of cybercrime that can happen. What are the costliest ones we're looking at? Of course, most of us know the email compromise cyber crimes. We also look at investment cyber crimes, and also there's the part that talks about government impersonations. So here's what I want you to see. If you think that investing in cybersecurity is costly, I think you should think again. Just look at the trajectory, look at the growth. If your organization is finding it difficult to comprehend your recommendations or why they should take your advice, maybe you should show them the statistics to see that it's an alarming rate, that these guys are constantly evolving. They are constantly learning how to manipulate the system. And it's very important that they equip you with the relevant finances that you need to provide the right solutions and tools to secure organization. So I think, Richie, this is basically what I want to talk about on this topic.
Great. And that's indeed very informative. I mean, in terms of actually providing those data, those statistical information. And this is the type of information that the executives are looking for from us as cybersecurity leaders, to be able to do the necessary research, not just a matter of fluffing in the name of actually getting those what we would describe as the shiny tools within organizations. As many cybersecurity professionals, I mean IT personnel, always like those shiny tools. I mean, those toys, as they would describe those within these organizations. So oftentimes they see us as persons who are just trying to implement all of these, I mean, fancy frameworks, tools, gadgets. So having this knowledge of actual data can actually help us in a number of ways in terms of actually making the case that we can use to provide the necessary evidence for the reasons as to why we need their support. So, no, organizations can definitely minimize and even simplify risk assessments by focusing on four core areas within their organizations. Are you talking about things such as your firewalls? I mean, the various backup solutions that you use within your environment, things such as your MFA, and looking at things such as ways in which you regularly verify access to systems within the organizations. Now, all of these control mechanisms definitely need the support of the executives within your organization in terms of actually rolling out these various programs that the organization need to mitigate or to deal with the necessary risks that they are exposed to within an organization. So having this knowledge, this background knowledge, experience, being able to align what you do with the business objectives, and also to be able to communicate in financial terms is a very advantageous position to be in as a cybersecurity professional, regardless of your role. Having that insight, that background, that understanding of how it is that cyber aligns with our finance can actually help with gaining the support of our executives is very, very important. So, with that said, let me quickly just remove this from our screen. All right. So, with that said, guys, so let us first look at the our objectives for this episode. Let me quickly just bring this to focus for you. Share screen. Okay. So, just for persons who might have missed the first two series, as I mentioned before, you can always check our CyberJA podcast, I mean series, and you can always get the necessary details. So last week we looked at six main objectives, elements. I mean, looking at what is cybersecurity, financing, the importance of having an understanding of cyber finance as it relates to cybersecurity, cyber finance when communicating with the executives, and also case scenarios involving cyber finance. And that is where we will be spending most of our time in terms of actually looking at those realistic case studies, scenarios, and actually applying various financial calculations to these scenarios in terms of bringing across the point as to why we need the support of our executives within our organization. So for this week, that's week 3, these are the elements, that we'll be focusing on for this week. So we're looking at frameworks used for managing cybersecurity finance. Right? And this might be interesting for a number of persons looking at those various frameworks that we can use to help us in our various, calculations or applications of cyber finance that can be used to make the case for the implementation of our various cybersecurity requirements. Also, key concepts and principles of cybersecurity finance, and also our main focus are those case scenarios involving the cyber finance calculations. So these are the main objectives for this session. So as it relates to the various key concepts and principles associated with cybersecurity financing, there are a number of principles, there are a number of concepts that we previously mentioned. And within each series, we always like to reinforce some of these, concepts, uh, terms that you need to be aware of, in the fact that these expressions, these terms, are going to be used in the various scenarios, case, and also the calculations that we use. So within each series, we always like to reference those and also to bring them to your attention. And there are a number of key concept, key principles. We're talking about things such as financial impact assessment, return on investment, total cost of ownership, cost benefit analysis, risk management, budgeting and resource allocation, compliance and regulatory requirements. All of these financial concepts or principles as it relates to cybersecurity have associated formulas and calculations that can be applied to various scenarios to make those cases for the executive support. So that's as it relates to financial impact assessment, return on investment, total cost of ownership. Can you shed some light on these, or just to remind persons of these key concepts and principles? Nelson?
Sorry, I muted myself, so I'm trying to share my screen. Can you help me to share the screen and just share something?
Okay.
Oh yes, yes. Thank you so much. So sorry for that. I kind of muted my mic so that I would also learn from you to listen carefully. Okay, so the key concept that we talked about right now that we will be looking at, so key concept and principles of cybersecurity financing. We've been talking about this over and over and over again for the past couple of weeks. And just like Richie mentioned, some of the key ones that we just want to re-emphasize, we're trying to look at these 3. So if you focus on the screen I'm showing, I'll be talking about financial impact assessment, return on investment, and also the cost of ownership. Now, what is basically financial impact assessment? Now, the concept of financial impact assessment is that you try to assess the financial impact of a cybersecurity instances and breaches or possibly risk. Now, to do this, you're trying to quantify the potential cost associated with, for instance, a data breach, a system downtime, a regulatory penalty that can occur, maybe a legal fee, maybe the cost of trying to notify your customers that something has happened, and also maybe things like reputational damage and other financial consequences. So that's the concept behind financial impact assessment. You're trying to assess the weight of or the magnitude of the attack, the magnitude or the effect that attack has cost on your organization. So that is the idea behind the financial impact assessment. And you're doing this from the financial perspective. You're looking at how much did you spend to respond to the incidents? How much did you spend to mitigate the risk? How much did you spend to bring back your system since the system, for instance, was taken down? How much did you spend trying to inform your customers? How much are you spending on legal and regulatory fees? So all this kind of sums up to what the financial impact assessment. Now, if we talk about the return on investment, now that's more of like a concept where you try to evaluate the financial benefit and the cost effectiveness of a cybersecurity investment. So you try to what? You try to compare. Now, the goal is comparing the potential of saving from a risk reduction and an incident prevention perspective with the cost of implementing and maintaining a security control. So that is the whole idea behind what the return on investment. You look at the cost benefit, look at the cost effectiveness, and you try to say, if you had this tool in place, how much would it have saved you when you didn't have it in place? So that's the whole idea. You have those, you subtract, you're able to find out the cost that it would have cost your organization if you don't have a security measure in place. So that's the idea around return on investment. Again, just to emphasize that we had talked about this previously. Now, to finalize on my own side, where I'll talk about the cost of ownership. Now, to analyze the cost of ownership is you try to find how what would be the cost of maintaining your cybersecurity measures over its lifetime, over its life cycle. How much would it have cost your organization to maintain a particular tool all throughout its life cycle? So this does not only include an upfront cost of acquiring the technology. You're looking at everything. Things like how much did it cost you to obtain the tool? How much are you paying for maintenance if, for instance, you're trying to maintain or service that particular tool? Now, all possible ongoing expenses like licensing, maybe training and maintaining, training your workers, maintaining and supporting the tool, all that you can factor that into the total cost of ownership of that particular tool or solution that you're using. So Richie, this is the whole idea around these three major important points I try to address: financial impact assessment, what is return on investment, and of course, again, what do we understand by total cost of ownership?
Great points there on Nelson. And just to add, in terms of there are so many calculations and terms that are associated with cybersecurity financing, and just to highlight a few, additional um, concepts to what you have actually just mentioned. So you have things such as your cost benefit analysis. And this is very important. I mean, when you talk about the cost benefit analysis, this you're looking at, this is something that evaluates the financial cost and also the benefits of different cybersecurity options, right? So this involves quantifying the potential cost of cybersecurity incidents and comparing them to the financial benefits resulting from risk reduction and incident prevention. So by conducting your cost benefit analysis, then organizations can prioritize uh, the their various investments based on their financial impact and select the most cost effective cybersecurity measures. Risk management, and this in of itself is very important as relates to cybersecurity. And this is closely intertwined with risk management, which of course involves identifying, assessing, and mitigating cybersecurity risk. So all of these are aligned with various calculations, budgeting and resource allocation, right? So you definitely need to know how it is to convince management um, as it relates to allocating necessary budget and financing to support your initiatives within your organization. And also, a very big one in today's environment is that of compliance and regulatory requirements. So, compliance with really industry regulations and legal requirements is a significant aspect of cybersecurity finance. And non compliance can lead to financial penalties, legal fees, and reputational damage. So, as a cybersecurity professional, then the financial considerations are essential when evaluating the cost of compliance and ensuring that adequate measures are in place to meet regulatory requirements and avoid consequences. So, regardless of your role in cybersecurity, understanding these fundamental, concepts, having these terms within your vocabulary makes you stand out when you speak, when you represent, when you communicate within your organization. At least they can say this individual is not just about zeros and ones, bits and bytes, but at least you have that um, alignment with the business, the organization in meeting its objectives. So With that said, guys, then what we want to do at this point is also move on to our second objective, which is the main objective of today's session. That's the main focus. Let me just quickly bring that back on screen for you. So, main second, that's key concepts, right? So we're going to be looking at the case scenarios involving, or sorry, the frameworks used for managing cybersecurity finance. And we need to talk about a framework. A framework is pretty much just like a set of best practices, or it's pretty much like a skeleton, if you want to look at it that way, that is established that you can actually apply to various situations, various, circumstances that you can actually tweak, modify, and adjust accordingly to your situation based on industry established best practices and guidelines within a particular industry. So we're going to be looking at some of those frameworks that are associated with cybersecurity financing that can also help with um, executing or helping you as a security professional to conduct a number of assessments and calculations, and also as it relates to various case studies, and um, to bring across the point of the need for cybersecurity financing from the executives within the organization. So there are several frameworks and approaches used for managing cybersecurity finance within an organization, and these frameworks help establish financial processes, budgeting, and decision making structures specific to cybersecurity. And we're going to be looking at two of the many that exist. And for sure, you definitely would want to take that time to do further research, as we always recommend, to build your knowledge base beyond what we are actually sharing with you. So, Nelson, it's over to you to start in terms of, sharing. Sure. Let me.
Okay, thank you so much, Richie, for helping out. Okay, and once again, just re-emphasizing that the focus today is talking about the frameworks. And top on the list that we are going to be talking about today is the FAIR, FAIR, which stands for Factor Analysis of Information Risk. And this is based on the idea of a quantitative risk management. So we can call this a quantitative risk management framework. Now, the concept behind FAIR is that it enables your organization to access and quantify the cybersecurity risk in financial terms. And how does this work? It works by evaluating the probable frequency and magnitude of a cyber incident and their financial impact. Now, the idea behind FAIR is a structured methodology for measuring and analyzing risk, allowing your organization to make a more informed decision about resource allocation, risk treatment, and several other decisions that they would make. So the idea is that it helps you kind of have a more structured and systematic approach where you access and analyze different cybersecurity and risk situations in a more rigorous and continuous manner. So that's the idea behind FAIR, which is the factor analysis of information risk. Now, this concept is being applied by key elements. And I'm going to share this key element, and we can talk about this key element in a minute. Okay, so don't forget that we talked about the goal of the FAIR concept, FAIR framework, is that it helps you have a more structured and systematic approach to accessing and analyzing whatever type of cybersecurity risk that may happen to your organization, what in a more rigorous and consistent manner. You want to have consistent, you want to make sure that everything is constantly checked at the right time. You have more metrics to measure. Now, this whole idea is built on four key elements. One of that is called the loss event frequency. And the next is called threat event frequency. So I have two screens. I'll be looking both ways. And the other one is called vulnerability. And the last is called the control strength. Now I'm going to key elements so we can understand how it all ties into the idea of the FAIR. Now, For loss event frequency, it helps you to estimate the frequency with which a specific loss of event may occur. Now, it involves analyzing historical data. Sometimes you may involve an expert to have an expert judgment. And also, you may consult other relevant sources to determine the likelihood of a security incident or breach happening. So, that is the idea of the loss event frequency. It helps you to estimate the frequency of which a particular loss would occur. And to do this, you look at historical data. Also, you may want to consult a third party who is an expert in that field to give you an expert judgment. And possibly you may consult other relevant resources with the goal of trying to find out the likelihood of a particular security event occurring. So that's the concept behind the loss event frequency. Don't forget, I talked about that. This whole idea behind FAIR is to help you have a more structured and systematic approach to resolving a security incident, and in a financial way. And to do this, we have key elements, and one of that is the loss event frequency that we have talked about. Now, the next one is what? The threat event frequency. Now, the goal or the idea behind the threat event frequency is that it assesses the frequency of threats, or maybe the threat agent targeting an organization's asset. Okay, now what it does is that it tries to consider things such as the sophistication of the threat actor, their motivation, and possibly the overall threat landscape. So that is the whole idea behind the threat event frequency. You check what is the frequency of a threat happening, or the frequency of the threat agent, and by doing this, you also try to consider the sophistication. How sophisticated are they? Is it a nation threat? What do they call it now? Is it an APT, for instance, advanced persistent target? So what exactly is it? How advanced persistent threat? What form of threat are you experiencing? So the idea is to just try to find out what is this threat frequency, what is their capacity, how are they targeting your organization, how sophisticated are they, and then you're able to understand again the overall threat landscape. Now, the third one is about vulnerability. Now, what do we do in vulnerability? Basically, we are looking at what the weaknesses or the gaps within an organization's security system. Or we can say that how can that particular system or control or the controls within that system be exploited? So the concept of FAIR is it looks at vulnerability in terms of their likelihood of being exploited by the threat agent. Don't forget that we've established that we check the frequency of the threat agent, or maybe the threat itself. Now we go down to vulnerability. We try to look at how possible can that weakness be exploited. That is the idea behind vulnerability. Now, the last concept or the last key element in this whole process is the control strength. I think I'll just zoom in a bit. Maybe my screen is too small. Now, the control strength is basically you try to measure the effectiveness of existing controls that are geared towards mitigating or reducing the impact of a potential loss. Now, if there's a probability that a loss would happen, do you have a control in place? And if you have a control in place, how efficient is your control in trying to help you mitigate the risk? Now, it considered factors such as the control design. You also look at the implementation of the control, and possibly, not even possible, you would also want to consider how well you monitor or gauge the degree of that particular control effectiveness. So that is the whole idea. How strong and reliable is your control against the particular risk that you have identified? So these are the 4 key elements that would help us utilize the concept of FAIR, which is what we've established there. Can someone help me? Okay, so I'll define it again. Factor analysis of information risk, which is a more quantitative approach to risk management. So that is the whole idea behind this whole concept of FAIR. Now, I want us to just look at a hypothetical example before we go into the numbers. So let's say that a company wants to assess the risk associated with a potential data breach. Now, how would they implement FAIR? The first thing they want to do is, I think I would need to write it this time. Just again, my notepad. Okay, so the hypothetical situation that we just looked at now, a company wants to assess the risk associated with a potential data breach. Let's even say this is a financial institution. How can they implement the concept of FAIR to the whole concept, the whole situation? Okay, so the first thing we want to do is you try to identify the specific asset at risk. Okay, so the first goal is you identify the specific asset that is at risk. Now, this can be things like customer data, it can be things like intellectual property, it can be things like financial information. These are possible assets that you would have in your organization. So the first goal to apply FAIR is to identify that asset that is at risk. Now, the next thing you want to do is you want to estimate the loss event frequency that we talked about. And to do this, what we try to analyze historical data. We also try to get expert judgment on situations, recommendations, and also maybe consult other relevant resources that would help us make more informed decision. The idea behind looking at all these patterns, this historical data, is because you want to make more informed decisions regarding that particular incidents that you're trying to resolve. They're trying to measure. So we talked about. Okay. Now, the next thing that we want to consider, this is also just trying to apply this whole concept that we talked about, this whole four key elements that affect the concept of FAIR. Now, the next you want to do is they would want to consider the next key element, which was the threat event frequency. Now, by examining the possible relevant threat landscape, that's how they try to do this. You try to find out the threat event frequency by examining the possible or relevant threat landscape. So this includes things like analyzing the motivation or capability of a potential threat actor. How well are they equipped? Is it a nation state? Is it so you need to find out what is the capacity of this potential threat actor. How sophisticated are they? So if you're able to know that, if you're able to predict that, then that kind of gives you an idea of how to build your tool. Also, possibly you can leverage on the resources outside. Look at informations, imagine trends. Maybe there's a specific threat actor that is out there that's already most people are already aware of it. You can also try to find out with information available how sophisticated are this particular threat actor. Okay, so that's the concept of the next slide, which is you try to consider the threat event frequency. Okay, so just give me a minute. And then the fourth thing you want to do is you would want to access the vulnerability in the system that you have and the possible controls that could be exploited. Okay, so that's the next thing that you want to do. So what is the vulnerability existing within your system that can be exploited by that particular threat actor that you have identified? So that will be the next thing that you want to do. Now, after you must have done that, but this can include maybe, let's even just expand a bit on that. This could include maybe things like conducting vulnerability assessment, performing things like penetration testing, and also trying to analyze the efficiency of or the effectiveness of a particular security control that you have. So that's the idea. That's the concept of trying to access the vulnerability that you have in your system and your controls. Okay. And the last thing you want to do, you want to evaluate the control strength. Now, this will determine how well your current security measures can prevent or mitigate the potential impact of the data breach. Don't forget that we're looking at a situation of a data breach. We're trying to assess how can they apply the whole concept of FAIR to see how they can be able to financially determine the impact of that particular attack on the organization. They can use this as a case study to present to the management. Let's say, for instance, they're trying to say, let's invest in a particular data leakage prevention tool. For instance, they say, okay, let's do that. So they can use it as a justification to say, well, for this are the situations that can happen if this data gets outside, or these are the loopholes that we're seeing within our organization. We're able to see the metrics, we're able to measure, we're able to see the numbers, and you can present a case, a justifiable case to your management. Okay. So now that we've seen how we can apply the entire concept, leveraging on those key 4 elements that we talked about, the next thing I want to do now is that we would want to go in and now look at a case scenario, apply this formula that we have talked about, and now see the potential financial figures in a real life, so we can be able to kind of connect more with the whole concept. Okay, so before I do that, I'll just also want to reemphasize the key elements for those that are just joining us for now. Now, these are the key elements of the FAIR concept. 1, the loss event frequency, the threat event frequency, the vulnerability, and also the control strength that you have in your organization. So these are the key concepts that we talked about. So now I would quickly move on to the calculation so we can be able to look at a real case scenario and be able to kind of relate with all these definitions that we have looked at in just not too long ago. Okay, so now here's a very important, very I think nice case scenario that we can consider. Let's see. Okay, so here's a case. In this scenario, we're going to be looking at a financial institution who just experienced a data breach. So just similar to the steps that we followed through. So now we're trying to put figures to this information so we can be able to calculate. Okay. So in this situation, we're considering a financial institution. Now, this financial institution has experienced a data breach where personal informations of over 10,000 customers were compromised. Now, the organization needs to assess their financial impact, the financial impact of the breach, and they want to leverage on the concept of FAIR, which is the factor analysis of information risk. They want to leverage on that framework to determine what was the impact, or in terms of relating finances to this scenario, how much has it cost the organization? Okay, they're trying to assess the financial impact of that breach. Now, let's assume that they're saying that this is a customer information, this is our personal information. So we'll just make some estimates on the price. Let's say that it's going to cost them $500 for every customer record. Okay, so we would say the asset value okay, looks like my skills on is okay, good.
Colin, not to interrupt you, but just to quickly, I saw a question on screen. Is it
Okay.
this? Is it the fear the same with risk management? And I was just about to point out that they are, I mean, two similar, I mean, concepts, but they are not the same in terms as risk assessment. Although risk assessment is a component of the fear framework, but they are not the one and the same thing. And I will provide further clarity to the reason why I say no at some point as we go along. Yes, so continue.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much for helping out. My attention is focused on the screen, so I wasn't seeing that question, but it was good, good explanation. Okay, so we will move forward. Now we are looking at a situation where the financial institution, their customer information got leaked, and over 10,000 customers' information got leaked. And now, since we are trying to attach a value to this asset, we're saying that possibility that it's going to cost the financial institution $500 for every customer record, per customer record. Okay, so we would say asset value would be, we have 10,000 customers, all right, and we're looking at $500 per customer. So permit me to please pull up my calculator so I can get the numbers. Okay, I hope you can see my calculator. So we will do 10,000 by 500. Okay, we're looking at what it's going to cost. The asset value is around 5 million. Okay. So now we have established is, now we want to now move again to the next item. We want to find out the lost event frequency. And what is an estimate of the frequency with which a specific loss of events may occur. So this is an estimation again, okay? So now that we have established, we have calculated the cost of the asset. Now we want to find out the event frequency, okay? So let's pull out the idea. Now the organization will analyze historical data. To be able to do this, they would analyze historical data. They will possibly consult some external consultant that would give them an idea. They may possibly spend some time paying for some resources. So let's assume they have done all of that. Okay. So now they've gotten some information. Now, the threat event frequency is what the likelihood of that data breach happening. So now, based on all the information that they have gathered, they are estimating that it's about 10% likelihood for that data breach to occur within a given year. Okay. So if we all agree that that assumption can be made, you would say that the event frequency is 10%, which is equivalent to 0.1. All right. Now we've established two terms. We found out the asset value. We have also found out the threat event frequency. The next thing we want to do now is we want to determine the vulnerability. Now, based on the security assessment that they may have conducted within the organization, now that is uh, they have tried to find out. They look at the current security controls that they have, and they have looked at the effectiveness of that control. And now they are assuming or they're determining that their control is only 30% effective in preventing a data breach. You and I will agree that that's kind of very weak. So, but this is just a hypothetical situation. We're looking at a worst case scenario of the list that can happen. Okay, so now they have done that. They have looked at the security controls. They've looked at the effectiveness, and they're saying that they can only guarantee 30% of the effectiveness of this control. Now, to determine the vulnerability of that, we're going to what? We're going to minus that particular percentage from one. Okay, so I'm going to show you a formula to do that. Okay, let's move this here. Set value. Okay. Okay, so this is the way we would calculate the vulnerability. And just to save time, if we put this here, once again, we're looking at let's do it this way. If I pull up my calculator, the 1 minus 0.3, we're looking at 0.7. Okay, at the end of the day, we may still want to convert it to percentage. It depends on how we want, but for now, we just let's have both conversions close to us. Now, the next we want to do now is we want to determine the control strength. Now, the organization can maybe estimate the magnitude of their control loss to say that if a data breach occurs, the control magnitude will be maybe the amount of data that could possibly be compromised. Okay, and now based on this vulnerability that we're seeing here, they can estimate it to be maybe around 70%. Okay. The magnitude of the control loss, we are assuming it's up to 70%. Now, the expected loss can be calculated using the particular formula. So now that we have been able to look at the situation, make some assumptions, and pull out some figures, now we can be able to put that into a formula to find out the expected loss that the organization would possibly face because of this particular breach, leveraging on the FAIR concept, which is the factor analysis information risk framework. So now to do that, we look at the asset value, the threat event frequency, the vulnerability, and the control loss. Okay? Don't forget that we assumed that the control magnitude, the possible loss of that control was about 70%. And also we looked at the effectiveness of their control that they have already, and we see that their control is weak because they can only attest to 30% of the effectiveness of that particular control. Now, we will just now try to use this figures to determine the expected loss. Excuse me. Sorry, I've been staring at the computer for a very long time. So my eyes are pretty weak. So yeah, just okay. Richard, just give me a minute. I would need to get some tissue to wipe my eyes. My eyes are pretty weak. So just
Sure,
1 minute, please.
sure, no problem.
Yeah.
So, guys, you recognize at this point that um, the having a comprehensive understanding or the knowledge of cybersecurity financing in terms of the various formulas, the various calculations, the various scenarios, and the using the fair framework can definitely provide some clarity in terms of supporting or providing necessary support that you want. And the thing is, guys, this is all about bringing awareness of the various things that you can actually explore. And at no point are we saying that you need to be using this or using that, or to immediately learn how to grasp all of this information. So you can always go back, replay it, take your time, go through the information, and of course, do further research and to grab all the various elements of these presentations within the series, and to apply the information that is shared accordingly to your situation. Um, Back over to you,
Okay.
Nelson.
Yeah, thank you so much. So sorry, guys. I've been sitting on the computer for a very long time, so kind of having some fatigue. Okay, now we have been able to extract all the metrics that we'll be able to use for this calculation. Now, the next thing for us is just to apply this the fair formula that we have been able to we've been talking about all this while. Don't forget that today we're focusing on trying to help you know how to use the several cybersecurity frameworks that you can use to calculate and find out potential loss that your company can face. And one of the most common and very special one that most people use is the FAIR concept, which basically try to look at different factors in a more in a quantitative manner to be able to determine potential loss. And don't forget that the idea is that it utilizes a systematic and a structured approach. And if you know what we've done so far, we kind of followed a very relatable flow. We looked at the asset value. We look at what the possible vulnerability would be. We look at the threat frequency. We kind of try to identify key parameters in a more structured manner so we can see a pattern and now possibly find out what the potential and expected loss can be. Now, if we're able to extract all these parameters, now to be able to determine what the expected loss could be, which is the goal of using the FAIR framework, we try to what? We try to multiply the asset value by the threat event frequency, by the vulnerability, and finally by the cost loss magnitude. Sorry, the control loss magnitude. Don't forget that these are the key parameters we talked about looking at. You look at the loss event frequency, you look at the threat event frequency, you look at the vulnerability, and also consider the control strength. So these are the ideas. So the control loss magnitude is basically trying to identify the control strength that you have within the organization, okay? So now to put all this together that we have been able to the formula that we have been able to come up so we can know what could be the expected loss based on that particular data breach that has happened to this financial institution. Okay, so if we replace all this that we have, so we know the asset value, which is 5 million, this is it here. We know that the threat frequency that we estimated, which was 10%, we looked at it here. Now we also looked at the vulnerability, which is what? 1 minus the effectiveness of the security controls that they have for that vulnerability. And they had admitted that they only have 13% effectiveness. That control is only 30% effectiveness. Now, and the control loss magnitude. Now, putting all this together, we're able to identify that the expected loss from this particular data breach is going to be equal to what? $105,000. Yeah. So this is what we're looking at. Now, in this scenario, right, we calculated the expected loss resulting from the data breach, which we'll find out that is going to be around 105,000. Now, this is the value that represents the financial impact of the data breach based on the concept of FAIR. Now, by quantifying the financial impact of this breach, the organization can make more informed decision about risk mitigation. They can also look at what the maybe resource allocation, all geared towards ensuring that they have the right measure of the right security measures to prevent the cyber attack happening in the future. This can also be maybe them investing in cyber insurance. This can also be them investing in additional security tools or trying to train employees and all that. So that is the whole idea. Now, very important to mention, if you notice that we did a lot of estimation, the concept around FAIR depends on some estimations and assumptions. And you will need to have some historical data to be able to make some of this assumption, especially when we're trying to consider the threat event frequency and also trying to consider, I think that's that particular one that we try to consider had required us to make some estimation. So it's very important that you always, if as much as you can, keep some data within your organization, because you're going to leverage on that at some point to make some of this predicted analysis, and that way you can make more informed decision. The goal is to help you to drop down possible security or cyber attack to the barest minimum. So I think with that, I hope that we've been able to understand the concepts around the FAIR, which is the factor analysis of information risk that is geared towards helping us to estimate potential loss. And don't forget, it's a quantitative risk assessment idea. It's based on that framework. Okay, so over to you, Richie.
Oh, awesome, awesome, Nelson. That's very informative in terms of that alignment and application. And as we have mentioned earlier, there are a number of frameworks that can be applied to various cybersecurity financial calculation, making that case for whatever it is that you're doing in the organization. So let me quickly bring your attention to, as we had mentioned, that we'll be looking at two of these frameworks that can be used, of the many frameworks. Um, the second one that I want to bring to your attention is what we call the ITIL, and that's the Information Technology Infrastructure Library. And many of you might be familiar with this, especially for those who are in service management. So the fact is that ITIL service, the ITIL is a framework that focuses on IT service management. And why not exclusively dedicated to cybersecurity finance? Then it offers the necessary guidance on financial management within the IT domain, in terms of the fact that IT provides the financial or the principles and also the best practices for things such as budgeting, cost management, financial planning, and also accounting of IT services, which you can then use as a cybersecurity professional to apply these to cybersecurity initiatives within an organization in terms of gaining that necessary support. So, to make this a little bit more clear for many of you, then we're going to be applying this to our particular case scenario. So, IT service continuity management process can definitely help as it relates to calculating the cost of a downtime resulting from a cyber attack. So we're going to be looking at how it is that we can actually use this framework in terms of the IT service continuity management process to help in calculating the cost of a downtime resulting from a particular cyber attack. And this information will be very valuable to the management, the executives within an organization. What will it cost us if we are faced by an attack and our system actually goes down out of commission? What would that cost be to the organization? And as a result of this, they could make the necessary decision as to what it is that they need to invest in, what it is that they need to provide support with, in order to ensure that the necessary mechanisms are in place if this should happen, or what it is that they can do to prevent this from happening. So let's say we have a case scenario where, let me quickly just add this to our screen for you to better understand. So the scenario that we have is that a financial institution experiences a cyber attack that results in a system outage lasting for 5 hours. Now, during this downtime, the organization is unable to process transactions, access customer accounts, and provide essential financial services. The incident directly impacts revenue generation and also customer satisfaction. No business, no organization want to be in this position. This negatively impacts, reputation of the organization, and the list goes on. Stakeholders, um, especially if it's a case whereby this organization might be listed on the stock market. So all of these things can be affected. So let's look at how it is that we can actually use the ITIL, service continuity management process, in terms of that framework to establish the resulting cost of downtime resulting from the cyber attack to the organization. So having this scenario in mind, then there are a number of things that we need to bear in mind for this particular calculation. And the very first thing that we need to look at is that to calculate the cost of downtime resulting from the cyber attack, then we need to consider the financial impact on different aspects of the organizations. That's very important. What will be the financial impact on the different aspects of the organization? Once that is established, then all of this will be then put together in a formula that can actually provide you with the necessary results that you're looking for. So the very first thing that we want to look at is, and I will quickly be just going through this for the interest of time, guys. Um, Very first that you want to look at is what we call revenue loss. That's the first impact, right? And these figures that we have, for sure, in the real world, you would have done your necessary research to actually come up with these necessary figures from the relevant departments within our organization. So the very first thing is the impact on revenue loss. And in this case, it is based on research within the organization from the necessary personnel. It is estimated that the average revenue generated per hour within that organization is valued at $500,000. And the duration of the downtime based on the case scenario is 5 hours. Right? So we have revenue loss, that's the first impact, right? And in this case, it states that revenue loss is, all right, so revenue loss is equal to the average revenue per hour times duration of downtime revenue loss. And in this case, this would be the 500,000 times 5 would equal to $2.5 million. All right, so that's the very first impact in terms of what it would cost in terms of revenue loss. All right, so let us look at the second impact. So this cyber incident on the organization would then impact your customer. Right? So in this case, it states that the number of affected customers based on the case scenario, you have 10,000 customers for this particular organization, and the average customer value per hour is estimated at $50. Therefore, the customer impact would be, let me quickly remove these from our screen to make things, all right. So the customer impact would be the number of affected customers times the average customer value per hour times the duration of downtime customer impact, which would be $10,000 times $50 times 5, which would equal to $2.5 million. That's the impact on the customers. Then we're going to be looking at regulatory penalties, and this is the third element of the equation. Therefore, regulatory penalties in this case would be potential regulatory penalty for a breach of service level agreements. It is estimated at $100,000. Therefore, the total downtime in this case, guys, total cost of the total downtime based on all those variables which have been estimated and calculated previously, total cost of downtime would be the revenue loss plus the customer impact in this case times the regulatory penalties, which you would have calculated here before. Um, and in this case, then your total cost of downtime would be 2.5 million plus 2.5 million plus 100,000, which would equal to 5,100,000. Not a good position to be in light of your overall budget. So having this knowledge, understanding how to apply these frameworks, being able to communicate from this perspective to the executives will definitely put in a far better presentation in terms of communicating and gaining their support for the necessary financing and support that you need as a cybersecurity leader, manager, executive within the organization to execute the various programs that are required to deal with the associated cyber risks to an organization. So, guys, having highlighted all of these um, elements, then we definitely trust that you are now in a better position. Looking at weeks one, two, now we are at episode three. Being able to look at all of those elements, look at all of those terms, case scenarios, then this understanding should definitely put you in a far better position in terms of that alignment with the organization, the business, and also to be able to communicate and to speak that language of business in relation to cybersecurity um, to your executives within your organization. So, Nelson, do you have any final words before we conclude this series?
Okay, thank you so much, Richie, for that very detailed explanation regarding the ITIL concept. One thing I would say is that there are different methodologies or frameworks out there that you can leverage on. We just picked these two because of time and also to use it as a case study and example to build on the knowledge that you have gained so far. The idea is that what you have learned in the past 3 weeks, that you are able to understand the concept, understand the ideology, have that mindset, and then look for the better or the best way to be able to now communicate your own concerns to your management. Now that you're well informed or well aware of the relevance of being able to translate these fancy tools, according to how Richie calls them, fancy tools, to financial terms and present to your organizations so that they can be able to make more informed decisions. Now, for those of you that joined late, we had showed something earlier. We came across an analysis, a research on a trend that cybersecurity is being predicted to increase in a very rapid pace. Now, the threat actors, these guys are constantly learning new tools to be able to sabotage your system. Now, if understanding that a particular tool is important, but now having a problem on how to communicate that, we believe that now you understand how you can communicate the relevance of that tool, attaching a number, attaching a use case situation to that, and present to your top management. And to reemphasize the part that we talked about when we started, always try to simplify your communication. This whole mathematics, this whole finances is for you to create a balance between your technical knowledge and your financial knowledge, basically, and now able to channel that wisdom or that knowledge that you've been able to build and communicate the need to implement the right security tool. Our goal is to make sure that we empower our community with the right knowledge. That's why we are leveraging on what we know to help you out to succeed. So that's all, Richie.
A great point to end on. So, guys, see you in next week's series. So, until then, stay safe.
You didn't mention that next week is the last week.
Oh,
Oh,
yes. Oh, thanks for
okay.
reminding me. So, guys, definitely do not want to miss next week's series. Next week is the final of the Cyber
This
Finance
one.
GRC series. So, you're definitely in for a treat, guys. So, definitely share with your network, and we'll see you in the next series. So, stay safe, guys. Bye.